Heard.
Welcome to Life is for Living. I'm your host, Kylee Buckley, and I'm here with David J. Riddell from the School of Living Wisdom. Today, we're going to be discussing the evidence of borderline personality disorder. David, are you able to speak to us about that and what we need to look for?
Oh, yes. I hadn't been a counsellor for very long before I realised that a high proportion of the marital breakdowns had at least one person in the relationship creating trouble who had no love for truth and would punish anybody who told them the truth. They had a permanent delusion or psychosis, and it was as if they had one agenda only, and as long as you complied with that agenda, you were acceptable. But if you ever confronted them, you were off the Christmas card list immediately. And they were difficult people to relate to. You couldn't really negotiate with them. They could come into a perfectly happy little business and create chaos within 48 hours. And employers were employing them to their sorrow. Women were marrying them to their grief. Men were marrying them and are unable to stay with them. Children eventually didn't want anything more to do with them. And when they get a job as a pastor or as a CEO or director, then there's a high staff turnover or people turn over following.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is that they try and fit everything into their one agenda. So I do call them single agenda people, and I keep an eye out for them because when I'm doing premarital counseling, if I find that one of them fits that profile, I will advise them not to marry until they've got some help with that agenda that's giving all the problems. And I can identify them quite quickly now because they have no love for truth. They're often very dogmatic people. They can be violent, very highly manipulative. And if they're both very intelligent and very insecure, then they can hold people in their manipulative talents very easily. And they often have a string of people having emotional breakdowns in their wake. So I want to talk about some of the evidences of the borderline personality disorder or the narcissistic personality disorder that I have called crazy makers, but I think probably the most useful title for them would be single agenda human. We'll talk about that. For example, the first one I wanted to draw your attention to, Kylie, is how thin-skinned they are,
Mm-hmm.
uh, how personally they take stuff. And by stuff, I mean correction or criticism or misunderstandings. I mean anything that they can take offense at, they usually do because they're thin-skinned. And the reason they're thin-skinned is because they've never individuated. And another word for individuation is they've never got on their own 2 feet.
Right.
See, you really don't get on your own 2 feet until you've settled one very important question. And the question is this: am I or am I not okay? Because if I'm not okay, I need to spend all of my time proving that I am okay and making sure that nobody tears the facade off me that will disclose that I'm not okay. And so these guys are allergic to rejection or correction because their mind, having a single agenda, has misconstrued any correction, particularly by a woman, as rejection or criticism. They have never distinguished between correction and criticism. And as a result of that little problem, they're touchy, they're defensive, and they're thin-skinned. And if you marry one of these, you're going to have to tiptoe around them. And nobody's at their best, I think you'll agree, no one's at their best when they're tiptoeing around somebody in the family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The common vernacular is they need to get over themselves. Well, I don't disagree with that, but I don't think it's that helpful. I think we've got to tease out exactly what does it take for one to get over oneself. And that really starts in psychological terms with re-establishing your self-worth, your self-esteem, and the question, am I or am I not okay? I
Mm-hmm.
don't need to be touchy, moody, volatile if I know in my heart of hearts that basically I'm okay. But if I don't know that, if there's self-hatred or self-rejection swirling around in the mists of my mind, then watch out. I'm going to be cranky, I'm going to be unpredictable, and I'm going to bite when you least expect it because of your belittling, insulting, put down that was actually nothing of the sort apart from what my imagination made it out to be.
Mm-hmm.
And crazy makers can't keep friends unless those friends give up their own terms and are there for the crazy maker on the crazy maker's terms only. So if you confront them or correct them, better watch out. You're going to be punished for that. Is all this making sense?
Yeah, unfortunately, it does make sense. It does. You've got here in your notes complete inability to listen, allergic to restriction, and boundaries.
Well,
That's fun.
here's the thing, if you swim out in a rip or to surf to save somebody, they're not much interested in listening to you. They just want to keep their head above water. They're a single agenda dilemma. And even children whose minds are in a panic or under duress cannot listen to their parents' correction or advice. And certainly husbands and wives do not listen when they're in the grip of this thing. And I would say that more marriages have broken because somebody wasn't listening than any other single reason. But
Mm.
how can you listen when there's an alarm going off in your brain that doesn't stop ringing? You
Mm.
can't hear this person in front of you because your own agenda is so overarching. And what is that agenda, Kylie? It's the agenda to make you see things my way, to persuade you and persuade you by whatever means I've got to make you conform to my perspective and my reality. And my reality is so all-consuming. I don't have room for your needs and your feelings and your reality. I've barely got enough room for my own. And that's where we get that narcissistic trait from, being in pain. The more pain you're in, the more likely you are to be thinking about yourself.
Mm. I suppose it's really important for parents that can see this in their children to get them help as soon as they can. Yeah.
Yes, the more self-focused a child is, they become deaf to their parents, deaf to their teachers. And the thing is, you've got to have a degree of mental health before you can listen to other people. If you haven't reached that level, you all you can do is persuade. And why are you persuading? So you won't have to feel your unbearable feeling of disappointment or powerlessness or rejection, the feeling that you just cannot bear.
So it's fear that's behind it.
Well done, you've nailed it. It's always fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of disappearing, fear of not being heard, fear of losing all your power.
Yet, if they were able to recognize that and realize that they can add to their life, come alongside people and actually have your life built in with other people's lives, they'll be far better off.
Well, as some people have said to me in the counseling room, why should I listen to you? Why should I take directions from you? Why should I submit to your authority? And my answer is because your life will be better off for it and you won't disappear. There is that sense that they will disappear if they start taking directions or corrections. They will cease to exist, and the father or mother that they were so intimidated by will swallow them up. That's why people become rebellious. They're desperately afraid of trusting somebody, because if they submit to somebody whose will is not the same as their own, they will just completely disappear. It's a big fear for all people to some degree, especially the rebellious ones.
But the truth is, if they don't, they do disappear because
You're
people
right
have
on
had
that.
enough.
Well, you see, there's no hope for an unteachable person. When somebody won't be corrected, they'll be arrested. And if they still won't be corrected, they'll do time. And if they still won't be corrected, they'll go back for another time until they discover they've spent half their life in jail and it's nearly over. What a
Mm.
waste. All for the fear of submitting, taking correction, getting advice. And that's why crazy makers always have one thing in common. There's been a loss of basic trust in their childhood or in their earlier formative years.
Oh,
Basic trust got wounded, damaged, bruised badly, and when they lost basic trust, they lost the ability to be reasonable, to negotiate, to submit, and to discover the mutuality of submission. They don't trust, so they cannot merge in a team or in a family.
wow. Number four, you've got may play mind games.
Well, when I think back to my own insecurity of youth, I did my share of mind games, and I found that since I wasn't violent by nature, I could take people down a peg or pull the rug out from under them with mind games quite easily. And I had quite a arsenal of mind game weapons that I could call on to put anybody in their place and to pull the wool out, the rug out from underneath them. And but you've got to be very intelligent and very insecure to do that. And if you are getting good at that, then you can really hurt people very badly. In fact, I got to tell you that if I have two clients in a day and one is the victim of sexual abuse and one of them is the victim of long-term mind games, it's actually easier to get the sexual abuse victim healed than it is to get somebody who's been under the influence of an insecure crazy maker for many years to get them healed, because their whole idea of what is normal has been damaged, has been bruised.
Mm. Yes, and their perceptions. Because you lose yourself, don't you, when you've been subjected to somebody that plays games with you?
And when you don't know who you are, it can take a long time to put that identity back together again.
Yeah.
Same with people who come out of cults, who come out of religious zealotry groups, or who come out of deep atheism or rabid agnosticism or feminism or gender disorders. They've got such a slanted view of what is normal and what is real and what is reality that you've virtually got to teach them a new introduction to life and to doing life.
Yeah. Very sad, because it's not their fault. It's just, and often
Well,
I think good people get themselves in these positions because I try to help somebody and
for example, I said to one person, your way out of this is going to be to learn some basic assertiveness skills so that you can say what you need, you can ask for what you need, and you can negotiate, and you can do it with respectful assertiveness. didn't even occur to me that when they heard the word assertive, they thought dominating, bullying, stroppy conduct. That was the only understanding of assertiveness that they knew, because their father or mother hid behind that assertiveness term when they were being totally abusive. And
Mm.
so they just about get up and walk out of the session if I said to them, I need to teach you some assertiveness skills. It had never occurred to them that you can practice assertiveness quietly and with dignity.
Using words.
Yeah, using
Using
words.
words. You
And I should mention too, one of my favorite mind games as a teenager was the twisted paraphrase. And what you do with that is that you paraphrase what people are saying to you, but you give it a twist to make it sound ridiculous or extreme or pathetic, and fire back at them, with a so what you're saying is, which is not what they're saying, but you keep doing it until they're not quite sure what they're saying. And I learned that when people give me the old twisted paraphrase, I say to them, that's the second time in this conversation you've flipped my meaning. Are you doing that deliberately? And if so, what are you trying to achieve?
Nice.
And in saying that quietly and calmly, you expose their hidden agenda. Now, of course, they're not going to come quietly. They're not going to say, oh, sorry, mate, I was playing mind games with you, are they? But they are going to be forced to look at their real intent and what they're really trying to achieve here by making a fool out of everybody that they talk with.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, promises are meaningless.
Well, they're convenience promises. They'll keep them as long as it's convenient. But if it becomes inconvenient, then that promise is deemed no longer to be binding. And so you'll find that what you thought was a promise was actually a suggestion, dependent on the flavor of the day. And if they get a better offer, then they're going to flag your appointment or your deal. The deal you made with them doesn't mean anything if they get a better offer or if it suddenly doesn't suit them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, is this consensual sex or is this rape? You really don't know because it depends on their feelings and on their mood. And if their mood switches, then you're in great danger.
Mm. Interesting. And they can also, I suppose, make promises just to satisfy the moment, knowing that they're not going to go ahead with it.
Absolutely. Peace at any price, including telling lies or saying what's convenient. And certainly you're not going to get a real apology from them. It's more like, I'm sorry, you have a problem with that. It's the Clayton's apology, the one you get when you're not getting an apology.
Yes. Moodiness.
Well, their feelings are their reality. If I feel it, it must be true. And don't argue with my feelings or I'll hate you for it. How could my feelings possibly lie to me? And so they really are caught in the grip of emotion-based reasoning. They have no criteria for truth. And I think that's the thing in common that marks these people. They have no real love for truth. They have a love to be right. They have a love to be justified. They have a love to be in control. They have a love to be popular. Truth hardly figures on the spectrum at all.
Mm,
Truth is for them just very inconvenient at times.
yes. And with moodiness, I guess they have no sort of awareness on how they're coming across and how that's affecting people around them.
Yes, yes, I think that's right. It's all about them. And every family's got somebody in it that it's all about them. And often they've been spoiled, they haven't learnt consideration and never been taught consideration. And so the only thing that occurs to them is how it affects them. And the brothers and sisters see it
Mm,
and wonder at it and eventually just avoid or stay away or stop trusting this sibling. Have you noticed that? They
mhm,
just start, they just start keeping their distance, don't they?
very true. Automatic tune out as soon as instructions are given.
The glazed eye syndrome. Once you get past the first instruction, you've lost them.
Mhm,
Why? Because they don't want to feel inadequate, and instructions make them feel inadequate. They don't want to feel lectured at, and instructions make them feel lectured at. They don't want to muck up their agenda with your inconvenient agenda, and so that would be a compromise that they don't want. And so you get the glazed eye syndrome fairly quickly with somebody if you're telling them something that they really don't want to hear.
mhm. Repeatedly loyalty testing, repeated loyalty testing. Any question or challenge is viewed as disloyal, and it's time for another showdown.
Well, if you loved me, you'd stay home. If you loved me, you'd take me out. If you loved me, you wouldn't have forgotten my birthday. If you loved me, if you were loyal to me, if you're on the team side, if you were on my side, you wouldn't make independent decisions that don't involve me, or you would collapse your agenda into my agenda, and I would get what I want. But the fact that I'm not getting what I want is proof that you don't love me, you're disloyal to me, I married the wrong person, blah blah blah. It's just pretty endless, really. And one of the reasons for that is that these guys don't usually have negotiation skills anyway. It's always been my way or the highway, and there's not many things that are counter propositionable in their world.
Mm, okay. Distorted priorities, rages over trivia, and ignores important issues.
Well, they're furious because somebody burned the toast or left the milk out to go sour, or where did you put the remote control? They can get furious about those things, but they don't care that their son is out getting intoxicated and drinking and driving, or that their daughter is running around with boys they don't even know. They don't care about those things. Their idea of priorities has been set around their unbearable feeling. And if their unbearable feeling is powerlessness or loss of control, that'll set them off far quicker than the fact that they're in denial about the company bank balance or that they're using company funds dishonestly.
Mm, right. Let's do one more, and then I think we'll close and we'll do another one. If you want
Sure.
to do that. Okay, obsessiveness. Just can't let it go, but winds others up, not knowing when to stop or to back off.
Well, one of the definitions I've heard of the fanatic also fits the crazy maker. A fanatic is somebody who won't change their mind no matter what the evidence, but nor will they change the subject. And so they obsess and they become very dogmatic, and they're not going to change their mind. They've made up their mind, and facts are just inconvenient for them because, again, the truth is not their priority. Winning the argument is their priority, not looking like a fool is their priority, retaining respect is their priority, and in the process, they really can lose the plot.
Mm,
And it was interesting, and we should sign off with this little story when the Pharisees, the leaders of religion in the days of Jesus, came to watch Jesus perform miracles, which he did, hundreds of them right in front of them, and they still did not accept that he was the Messiah. He stood up and he looked at them and he said, "How can you people possibly believe in me? You who prioritize the praises of man far above the praises of God. You're living for your ego, you're living for your status, you're living for your social position. So your mind is not able to recognize me, not able to give your loyalty to me, no matter what you see. You could even see a man you know raised from the dead, and you still would not believe, which is exactly what happened with Lazarus, who many of the Pharisees knew well. And I often remember that, what a man thinks, usually in the final analysis, depends on why he needs to think it, why he needs to believe it. What is that hidden agenda? And that's why we often say, them that pay the piper calls the tune, because money is the root of all evil. And it's that desire for fame, money, wealth, popularity that prevents people from actually coming to the knowledge of the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what I call the cockroach syndrome, and the whole world lies in the grip of the cockroach syndrome.
Well, thank you, David. We'll be doing another session and continuing on with this in our next recording.
There's
Thanks.
plenty more in the arsenal of the crazy maker, I can promise
I
you.
know we've got a few pages here, but I really want to get through it and not skip
Well,
because I think it's really important that we get a
let's keep
handle on
in mind that we're not here to label people. What we're trying to do is give the people who are caught in the gravitational force field of these unfortunate, unhappy people some tools so that they can survive
it.
their encounter and their relationship with these distorters of reality.
Yes, and hopefully people that are like this can see themselves in it and come and ring you, David, and get some help.
Well, probably every week or two, somebody rings up and says, my spouse is calling me a crazy maker, and I think they might be right. I need some help. And I
Wow.
say, well, the mere fact that you're volunteering to look at yourself and get help proves to me that you're not a certified crazy maker. You're just an apprentice. There's every hope for you.
Wonderful. Thanks, David. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Kylie.